regulations are, um, can be not mandatory, but it can be followed as per the requirement. But regulations are mandatory to be followed. Yeah, so recording is started, right? Yeah, thank you. So, what are all the regulations in the industry? Okay, now we are listing up only the few regulations which has been, identified from US FDA regulations. So, CGMPs are listed in CFR, Code of Federal Regulations. This is for, um, it's for US particularly. This code for regular federal regulations. Part 210 and 211 is being very exclusively for active substances. Active substances, drug substances, API, all are the identical words, okay, similar to each other. If you call it as API, it's active pharmaceutical ingredients. The same can be told as active substances as well as drug substances. Drug product is something equivalent to formulation. When you tell anything about drug product, it is a final product. Drug substance, it is a active pharmaceutical ingredients. So this is the difference between drug substance and the drug product. So 210 talks about the drug substance. 211, part 211 talks about the basic instructions of formulations. Part 11 talks about the electronic data management, which is also called as the computerized systems. So whatever the requirements to be followed in the computerized system will be established. The guidelines, regulations are established in the part 11. So keep in mind, any CFR is mandatory to follow in the industry. Guidelines and policies, whichever has been circulated by any regulations, are flexible based on your product as well as the process of product manufacturing. That depends upon the process. So all guidelines, or sorry, all regulations have a set of GMP activities. So always they start with the organization and personnel. So the same has been here. So organization and personnel. Okay. So shall have a quality unit. That is very important. Any manufacturing site cannot work without the quality unit. So quality unit, as I told earlier, comprises of quality control as well as quality assurance. Sometimes they also have a in-process quality team, which means that in the middle of the batch or manufacturing process, the QA will go and inspect the product. For example, if it's a textile industries, okay, there will be a person who will go and take the piece of cloth and check for the quality of the cloth, okay, whether that has been properly stitched or not, whatever may be. So this is a similar practice everywhere has been applicable, either in the pharma industry or maybe a automobile or textile industries. So quality check is a very important aspect, because we have to ensure that the quality has been inbuilt in the product during the course of the manufacturing process. So this is always important to have a quality person on board on manufacturing site. We call it as a shop floor to verify the process is in intended process has been established. So quality unit with all discussed as last time, with responsibility to reject and approve all materials, procedures and specifications. So quality units once again comprises of QA, QC. So they have the responsibility, QC have the responsibility to reject or approve all raw materials, finished good materials and other stuffs. So procedures related to QC will be responsible to approve, and also the specification, QC and QA will be responsible to approve the procedures and specifications. Everyone will have sufficient training, as I told earlier. So no one will be left alone without any, unattended way. So everyone will be well established. Training will be imparted in the industry to keep up your knowledge and experience to do their job, without any flaws in execution. So these are all some basic hygiene practices where you have to follow. Wear clean clothing. So usually the company will provide you the uniform, proper uniform. You will be wearing a street garments outside to visit to the office. Once you reach to the office, there is a process. Sometimes you have to change the gowning inside when you're going to the QC or QA, or usually QA and QC will not have the change process, gown changing process, but production definitely will be having. first we have to remove our street garments, and then you have to go inside, wear a primary garment, and then go to the next level of clean room garments with the sterile garment, and then you enter into the main area where the sterile manufacturing is happening. So at the end, where really the manufacturing is happening, there will be a sterile garment will be used, donned by the operators. Okay, so where protective apparels to prevent contamination, the contamination both vice versa, from product to human as well as from human to the product. So in both the way, there should not be any contamination. So personal hygiene is very, very important, and good sanitization practice, that is very important. Of course, now COVID has alerted everyone to have this practice, but still, this is very common for the industrial people who work within the organization, specifically inside the manufacturing process. Every 10 to 15 minutes, they are supposed to, sanitize their hand with the IPA. We call it as an IPA solution, which is isopropyl alcohol. It's a kind of a sanitizer. So that will be available inside the premises where the manufacturing is happening. So every 20 to 30 minutes or anywhere he touches his hand somewhere during the operation, so he is forced to do this sanitization practice now and then. Okay. So if you are sick or having open lesions or wound that would impact the drug, then you will be excluded from direct contact with the product. So it should be voluntarily, operator should explain that is not well or maybe sick or coughing or something, which is not feeling better to work within the area. Both vice versa, it should not impact the product as well as the person. So it is voluntarily, the person should come forward and tell that he's not feeling well today, so he can't able to go inside the manufacturing area to perform the activity. So everything comes with a record. Everything will be having a documentation evidences. So for example, if operator A found to be today ill, and then he wants not to go inside, that will be documented, the reason, with all these checklists. So name of the person, employee code, okay, his temperature was today higher side, so he's not feeling good, so he's having some open lesions, so he is not allowed inside the manufacturing area. So every day that should be checked, or it should be voluntarily told by the operator. So next point about this, we call it as a subtopics. The first one we already saw is about organization and personal. The next one is about the buildings and facilities. So these are the key factors. Okay, whatever we are seeing, organization is the key factor for manufacturing the product. Under the organization, there are 30 to 40 bullet points which needs to be mandatorily followed. So one among the top point is about the quality unit we discussed. Then we talk about the personnel. Now we are talking about the buildings and facilities. Building will be adequately sized for proper storage of equipment and material. Okay, operations will be performed in a specific areas. So what I mentioned now, the operations of sterile manufacturing will happen inside the core area, but to reach to the particular core area, you should be having a proper flow of path from dirty region to the clean area. So there is a grading of air and the area. Based on the grade of the air, the quality of the area has been determined. So obviously, a sterile material should need a high class area. In international standard organization, standardization of organization, I hope you might be saw this ISO, right? The word ISO. So ISO class 5 is equivalent to class 100 in the US reference. So class 100 means 0.5 micron size particles are 3000. Allowed particle size are 3000. So this is a reference. We'll be seeing that in the clean room concepts. All these numbers we can see there. For in general, for manufacturing of sterile products, we need ISO class 5. And next class is ISO class 7. It's an adjacent area where the quality of the air is little less, where the microorganism may be present in that particular area. And ISO 7 is little dirt, and ISO 8 is more dirt than that. So ISO 4 is very cleaner than ISO 5. ISO 3 to 1 or highest cleaning standard of the area, clean room standards. Okay, so when they are manufacturing these microchips or any space station activities, all these activities will be done under ISO 1 classification area, which means there should not be any very minute dust particles also should be present under this manufacturing area. For the manufacturing of microchips or nanochips or any semiconductors, as well as the activities which are going to be done at the space stations. So all these needs a very pure high class area beyond the pharmaceutical requirements. Our pharmaceutical requirements for manufacturing sterile compounds require ISO class 5 area. So now the next slide is going to talk about raw material received will be placed in quarantine until tested. So everything should be a systematic way in the organization. It should not be making mess or making the workers to go in a wrong decision to send the product which is a raw material for the manufacturing without the testing. So there will be always a layer of segregations. So once the raw material comes inside the premises, that should be verified, cleaned, and checked for any damages or check for its identity, and then it should be kept in the quarantine area, similar to our COVID. Okay, once the person has been infected, they are kept in quarantine. Similarly, the materials are kept in quarantine until it has been tested and proved that it meets the specification. So after the completion of this testing, the materials are stamped as approved. If it is not meeting the limit or specification, the materials will be considered as rejected. So after the quarantine, the material either moves to the approved area. If it is failed, it moves to the reject area. So all these color codings will be there. So quarantine will be in yellow. Once it moves to the approved area, it turns to green. If it moves to the reject area, it turns to red. Once the material has been seen back with the background of green color area, then we understood that it is a approved materials. If it isn't kept in the rejection area, it will be always in the lock and key, because rejected material mistakenly the warehouse person or production person should not use it. So all the materials which is rejected will be kept under the lock and key, and the key will not be with the warehouse person. The key will be with the QA person. So even for intentional or unintentional usage, the warehouse person will not have an access to use the rejected material. So that is the systems. These are the basic systems. Everyone knows about this system. Once you think deeply about all these process, is just a common sense. Okay. So rejected material no one should use. Hence, it has been kept under lock and key. Poisonous material. For example, you are in the QC and there is some poisonous chemicals. Okay. So all those poisonous chemicals will be kept in the lock and key. One key will be with one person, the other key will be with other person. So always it doesn't happen that with one key you can open and misuse the poisonous chemical. So that's the reason always there will be two locking and two keys will be there, and two keys will be with a different person. Something the same strategy is followed in the banking sector also, and in many shops they'll be having two different locks, and two persons will have the key. So at any situation, one person will not be biased to take anything out from the box or from the shop or from the bank. So that is the security policies, kind of a mechanical security implemented in the industry practices. So there will be adequate lighting. Of course, in the facility, you should have a clear, visible lighting facilities. There is a requirement. It should be minimum 8,000 to 10,000 lux. So for the proper visibility, okay, there will be adequate environmental controls. The temperature and RH should be maintained, which is user friendly for the operators as well as for the product. There will be air brakes on drains. So if there is a drain, there will be an air brake which will not make from external air to come inside. So next, the continuation of building and facilities. Sewage and trash will be stored and disposed in a safe and sanitary manner. So any, as we discussed in the earlier class, any waste material which is coming out of the premises should be properly handled, and that also should be having a proper documentation. There should be a procedure written for that. How you are going to decontaminate the toxic material, how you are going to decontaminate the cephalosporin, penicillin material. So all materials, chemical compounds, which needs to be, which needs to be neutralized, should be properly addressed, and proper documentation and procedures should be in place. Adequate washing and toilet facilities will be available. So obviously for the human, they should be having accessible facilities with hot and cold water and soap solutions, and single service towels, which should not be a multiple use towels. So these are the requirements to be followed in the industry. It's very similar to how the hotels and restaurants are following that kind of uh, sanitary hygiene practices. So the next slide is talking about again on the building and facilities. Building will be maintained in a clean and sanitary manner. So it is always important that there should be a proper housekeeping in place to keep clean the facility and maintain in a tidy state. There will be cleaning schedule with approved cleaning agents. Okay, I hope you might have been seen in many restaurants or in hotel. You might be seen chart where the housekeeping person will be picking for morning they have cleaned, afternoon they cleaned, and evening they cleaned, and night they have cleaned. So that is a good documentation practices where ISO quality 9001 needs all those documentation practices. So it means anything is not documented, it's not been done. If a housekeeping person cleaned very well and it is shining, but he has not done any documentation, that shows that he has not done the cleaning process. So obviously, once you've done the execution, it should be documented, because execution cannot be seen, but document will be available, for years together. So always the pharmaceutical industries, and in this case, any industries, automobile or maybe a banking sector, any industries follow the documentation practices. It is very, very mandatory. For example, if you do a banking transaction in the bank, you will be having challan or checks or whatever maybe. They will give a slip to fill it, and you will be having a counter foil of the slip. So that is the evidence that you have been done some execution in the bank. And similarly, when you're doing an electronic transaction, okay, through your mobile banking or maybe a phone banking or internet banking, there will be a transaction ID created. So that is the reference that you have done at this timestamp some activity that has been performed by you by using your own username and password. So that is the identity of your execution. So documentation is very, very important. So it should needs to be documented well. Of course, there should be a cleaning agent. Proper cleaning agent should be used, which is approved. And specifically, when you are using inside the filling room, manufacturing of the products, the cleaning agent should not be creating a problem in the product. So it should not be a non-reactive cleaning agent that should not react with the uh, machine parts, because once you clean the machine parts, there may be a chance that will get stick in the machine parts, and that may contribute inside the drug. So always the cleaning agent should be approved by validation process. So what is validation? We'll come to know about in the next classes, but everything should be validated. So there should be a clear SOP written procedure on cleaning, how to do the cleaning, how to prepare the cleaning agents and other stuffs. Buildings in a good state of repair. So preventive maintenance is very, very important. So there should not be any light which is been broken or not burning within the premises. There should not be any crack also in the buildings. Why all these? Because if there is a crack, there may be chance of particle generation. So which are all the enemies for this sterile area? Particles, viable particles, non-viable particles are the main, enemies in the pharmaceutical manufacturing area. So that should be avoided. So that's the reason there should not be any, gaps or any, hole in the building within the premises, and there should not be any open, broken parts or any unwanted parts within the building. So any single piece of, equipment or any piece of metals are present inside the premises should be having some particular reason. If not, that should be removed from the premises. So that is meant by good state of repair. So always it should be in a working condition without any repairs. Of course, building and facilities should be maintained without, pest and rodents. So it should be free of pest and rodents. So always at the entry points there will be a insecticultures. Hope you might have seen in some coffee shops and restaurants they'll be having some insecticultures, right? Which will attract the flies and kill it. So similarly, in the ground they will be keeping this rodent plate, glue pads, or any kind of fungicides or insecticides or rodenticides. So this will ensure that some external animals are not crawling inside the premises and also inside the building and individual rooms. So the purpose is this kind of lizards or rats should not go inside and damage the product. If suppose it goes inside, the complete mess of the product will happen. We can't able to control that. So it should be very carefully, controlling that this should not enter into the premises. So now we are talking about next high level point is about equipment. So apart from building, the equipment is very, very important because the production happens with the equipment. So the equipments are direct product contact or indirect product contacts. So all direct product contacts needed to be a SS316L grade. So what is SS? Stainless steel. 316 is the combination of some metals, low carbon. L stands for low carbon, which also includes chromium and other material in the SS. So this SS316L grade will not rust, change its color in due time. So all other stainless steels, even it is stainless steel, if it is not of right grade, that will start giving you the rusting because of high iron content. But in SS316L, the content of iron will be less and other contents will be more, other metal contents will be more, which will ensure that there won't be rust is generated in the equipment. The rust, if rust is generated, what happens? That get mixed up with the product, and the product quality will not be set with the specification of our intended specification. It will be add on with the rust particles. So if any equipment is being damaged with the rust and the production is going on, the product will have the rust particles in the product, and if that comes to the consumer and if they take, that is a serious health impacts will happen to us. So in that way, equipment is very, very important to maintain at a good state of repair. Okay, so that's why they have a proper cleaning procedure, proper operation procedure, proper maintenance procedure for handling the equipment. So cleaning is very, very important. As I mentioned, the cleaning should be happen with the approved cleaning agent, because that should not be giving some corrosive or rust in the equipment surface. So ID number on equipment is also very important. The reason, there is a traceability. So if you have in your college, if all 100 people keep without any name reference and registration reference, we can't able to identify. So similarly, the ID number on equipment is foremost important, that this particular piece of equipment is used for this particular activity. So in case of any quality issues or critical complaint, all this traceability will be helpful for us to understand who is the culprit on that issue. For example, there is 2-3 instrument of same equipment, identical equipment. So we don't know from which equipment this problem has been erased. So to identify that, we should have a proper identification system. So if you have three different instruments, you should have three different numbers identified for that particular equipment. That is the need of the identification number. So that identification number is very important for all the instrument. If you have a similar instrument of the same three instrument, then you have to differentiate with three different numbers even. Okay, so now we are talking about the control of raw materials. So as I mentioned, all the raw materials will be come from your supplier. So they will provide you the raw materials, whatever you procured or intended from them. Then received in quarantine, not used until released. So as I mentioned, it will be in the warehouse department. All raw materials comes to the warehouse, which is going to be used for the production purpose. All chemicals, which is going to be used for the laboratory purpose, it depends upon the company to company. Sometimes they will ask to warehouse to take care of the responsibility, but most of the time that will be owned by the QC person. So QC will take the responsibility of their incoming chemicals and solvents and whatever required for the testing purpose. And whatever required for the production purpose, all the incoming will be managed by the warehouse department. Of course, QA will be the person to approve the incoming material based on their quality. They may go for a site inspection. They do an audit whether the product which has been coming from that particular facility is complying our standards. If Johnson wants to buy some material from X company, they will be having a full set of auditing team for the quality purpose. Okay, the team will go and evaluate the quality of the product which is being sent from that premises. And once they are having a confidence that this company which supplies Johnson and Johnson have a particular control on the products, then they will release and approve the supplier to release the material. If they identify some critical issues, then they will not allow the company to invert the material. Okay, this is the automation process. Sometimes the company follows in the automation process. Some companies go with the manual process. In the automation process, that particular vendor will be blocked. So once a quality person block the vendor, ultimately that will signal to all the other accessing person in the software, marks them that this particular vendor is blocked because of some reason. So you couldn't able to pull some quantity of material from that vendor. So that is the control from the automation process. So it's not a human driven, it's a system process program driven. So once it has been blocked, you are not allowed to pull any quantity of raw material from that particular lot. Written procedures on receipt, handling, and sampling. So there should be a very proper procedure how you are receiving the material, how you have to handle the material, and to sample the material. Because every material is having its own, safety issues, right? So we call it as material safety data sheet. So all materials are coming with the material safety data sheet. Accordingly, you have to, follow the procedure and safety requirements when you're doing some activity with that particular solution, or maybe a powder form or in a solid form. Let's take an example. If you're handling a concentrated H2SO4, you can't just go and do in such a simple way. You should be very precautious, because even a drop will make a problem in your skin and get irritation. So all these will be properly listed in the safety data sheet. So in case of any emergency, you have to contact very closely. The EHS department will be there in all the companies. So they will take the quick, immediate action how to recover you from that issue. So that's why a very proper handling and sampling procedure to be in place. Stored off the floor. So nothing should be kept on the floor. So they will be using some pallet or raised platform to keep the material. The reason not to store on the floor is sometimes due to moisture or condensation, the material will get damaged or lose its intended use, or maybe it may be lost its potency, or maybe it lost its increase in impurities. Something may happen, because of storing on the floor. So that's why it should be stored at the elevated position always. Each container marked with lot number, name, and status. So this is for the traceability. So everywhere, if you go inside the premises, there should be a clear traceability should be present there. If you go and see some tub, there is some white powder inside, but you don't know the white powder what is inside. That is a serious non-conformant. Everything should be traceable. What is the name of the material inside? How much quantity is remaining there? What is the date of use? When till what time I can use? Because some chemicals needs retesting. We call it as a retesting. If I'm not opening a chemical container for more than 2 years, okay, then it may have some problem in the storage condition. Even if you stored at a required condition as per the manufacturer recommendation, but still, if you are not opened the material for more than 2 years or 1 year, let's take an example, then you have to do a retesting process, which means that material should be tested before it's going for the use. Sometimes you open and tested some raw material and you used partial quantity. Let's take example. The 50 kgs are there, but in the January month you used 10 kg and you kept 90 kg as such, and you're not touched for next 1 year, and you're going to take after 1 year. Okay, in that case, if your retesting date is 6 months once, then you have to go for retest the complete material. If your retesting date is 1 year, every 1 year, then you have to complete the retesting after 1 year of completion. So these are all the common sense practices. There is nothing something rocket science behind that. Why we have to do all these things? Everything to ensure that the product is still in the intended use state. So now we are moving to the next slide. Again, about talking about the control of sampling, and here control of raw materials for sampling. Okay, sampling is a representative, so it should be like there is a procedure how to do a sampling also. I can't take a sample from one corner which is not replicating the complete scenario of the box. If you have 20 box, sometimes the critical analysis to be done for all the 20 box. If it is a sterile container, how I can do a sampling? Because once I open, the sterility is been breached. So mostly for the sterile container sampling, the supplier will give a very small miniature sample along with that particular lot. Means the huge 50 kg box, sterile box will be there, and the same package. If it's a SS box or it's an aluminum box or it's a polyethylene bag, so it's the same form of small miniature sample will be also provided by the supplier. If not, you have to request them to provide a small sampling bag, because during the sampling you can't open a big box of a sterile container. Once you open the sterile container inside some area, then the sterility is broken. So no use of using that. So ultimately, the sterile materials will not be opened until it reaches to the core main area of filling process. Only at the very last position, the filling at the filling area, the sterile box container will be kept open for the further process. Till then, all the testings, everything will be done with the sample miniature bag, small bag, pouch bag. So maintaining cleanliness is very important in the sampling area. It should be done in an approved area, because you can't sample 5 to 10 products at a time. Okay, there is a balance of activity. If I want to do some 2 different API, I can't do without cleaning. I can do one full set of process. For example, I want to manufacture paracetamol with some excipient. I can do API sampling, excipient sampling together. And sampling is different. Sampling is meant for testing purpose. Dispensing is meant for this dispensed volume is used for the batch purpose. Okay, so during the sampling as well as in the dispensing, between the raw material, critical raw material, there will be always a cleaning procedure, because the previous traces of product should not be impacting the next dispensing process. So any minute 2 gram or maybe 2 mg of dust particles from the previous product should not enter into the next product. So that's why the area should maintain cleanliness, and periodic cleaning before and after sampling will be always done. Prevent cross contamination, the one I gave the example. So how to prevent cross contamination? After doing the activity, clean the area, then go for the next activity. Okay, so containers marked showing samples taken. So obviously, once you have hundreds of containers, you should be having a evidence that which are all the containers are sampled. So sometimes they apply some sampling techniques. They won't do 100% sampling. For critical raw material, yes, they will go for the 100% sampling, but not for the excipients and other less critical raw materials. So they go with the root n plus 1 formula. If it is having less than 10, all they will be checking. If it is more than 10, they apply the formula called root n plus 1. So root n, you have to get some value. For example, if you have 16, okay, 16 boxes are there. Root n is 4. So 4 plus 1, 5 box will be taken for the testing purpose when you have 16 boxes. Okay, so when you have 36 boxes, so root n plus 1 is 6. 6 plus 7 will be applied as a rule for testing the raw material for the sampling purpose. So the next we are going to talk about production and process control. Okay, so now we are moving from the warehouse department to the production department, where the manufacturing process is going to happen. So there will be a written procedure. Obviously, any steps you are not going to do from your mind or from your thought process. Everything is well written. If anything is not written properly, that is your duty, a person's duty, to escalate them. This is the process I'm doing, but the SOP says in a different way. Either you're wrong or SOP wrong. There will be only two options. If you're wrong, then you're doing a wrong methodology. You're not following the procedure. If you're doing the right one, the procedure what is written is a wrong one. So obviously you have to correct the procedure and make it updated and revise it to perform always the right procedure. Okay, so that is in your hand. Whatever you're doing, the execution should be written. Whatever you're executing, it should be followed as per the written procedures. So either way, that should be documented evidence. You can't do without anything out of the written words. For example, the production procedure says switch off the reactor and then open the outlet valve. So you can't do without switching off. You can't open the outlet valve. You have to mandatorily switch off. That will be recorded in the database, and then you open the outlet valve to release to the next vessel. So this is the required practice, and this should be mandatorily followed. If you fail to follow the written procedure, then there is a terminology called deviation. So which means you are deviated from the procedure, which means that you are not followed the procedure. So that is because of your ignorance or your negligence or your lack of knowledge, whatever may be. That is the root cause we will be discussing later. But your ultimate aim is to be followed what is there written in the procedures. So even if it is telling something wrong, please go and highlight to the superior. Something it is showing which is not in a realistic way, please look at this, how to do that. You are always welcome to discuss with your superiors. Okay. Document activities. These are all the activities done in the production area. Batch records, the very prime record of the manufacturing of the batch. Logbooks. A lot of logbooks will be there. I hope your college instruments also will have hold logbooks, but we are not concentrating on that. Usually we will not concentrate, but if you're doing your doctorate, definitely these data will be useful. Until you're in a graduates of UG or PG, that may be not making sense for you to follow. But when you're doing your doctorate, all these evidences are very important. The reason is that shows that you use that particular machine or instrument for your testing purpose on this particular day, on this particular time, for this particular product to be tested, and you have witnessed that yes, I performed the UV for my silver nanoparticles or gold nanoparticles for 10 samples. So that is the evidence will speak when you go and demonstrate your research to some third person. Okay, so this is the documentation, importance of the documentation. So if you are not documenting, that is not been existing, that has not been done. So please pay attention. Document is very, very important in the industries. You go for any industries, electronic documentation or maybe a manual documentation, but documentation is mandatory. Okay, they ease the process of documentation. How? Instead of writing a huge number of papers, they will have a pre-printed database, pre-printed procedures with the filling blanks. Just you have to fill the blanks. Yes, I use 15 ml of hydrochloric acid, one normal hydrochloric acid. So there will be some reference number for that you will be using. And you use pH meter with equipment ID this. There will be the equipment ID in the pH meter. When you do the pH meter check, you have to write that ID. That is called real-time documentation. So the industry and the regulatory expects the real-time documentation. This is very, very important. This is the word you will be usually hearing many times in the industry, real-time documentation. Okay, so control contamination. Of course, in the production area, that is a responsibility. You have to control the contamination, which means that you are not allowed to bring something from the external area, for example, your food or maybe your chocolates or something. So nothing is allowed inside the production area, which is intended for its use. So the next is about the cleanliness. Of course, since this is a production, reactors, vessels will be used for the manufacturing of the product, definitely the cleanliness plays a vital role. So we call it as a cleaning of the reactors based on the cleaning validation. What is cleaning validation? So again, it's a type of validation to prove that your cleaning methodology, cleaning procedure, your cleaning mechanism using the different percentage of cleaning agent is adequate to clean the previous used product. I may be using previously a color product, or maybe a highly viscous product, or maybe a highly potent product, or maybe which is a highly very difficult to clean that product from the reactor. So your cleaning procedure should be validated three times. Okay, all these validations will be done minimum 3 times to prove that after doing these 3 times of my cleaning process, the intended cleaning activities have been achieved. So how to test the material is well cleaned? So you take some rinse sample, go for HPLC analysis or go for UV analysis. Then you can identify the traces of previous product is not present in that particular reactors or vessels. So that is the way you achieve the cleanliness, and that has been verified and validated. So keep organized is common terminology that you should follow at every places. And very important point is the reconciliation to be done. So reconciliation, what is reconciliation? This is just something like what you have given as an input, what you have given as an output. So reconciliation means what you have given as an input and what you get as an output. So that calculation. If you given 100 grams of raw material inside, you have to get outside 100 grams of product. Maybe you given 100 grams in a one pack, that will be coming out in 100 grams in a several pack, individual packs. But during this process, there is some wastage happens. Your wastage can be limited. Okay, your wastage can be limited, not more than 10%, not more than 5%, something like that. Since you have given like 100 grams of product inside, and you are just getting 10 grams outside. So there is no logic of doing this process, right? Because you are wasting 90 grams of product. So I'm just given as an example. Let's take you are using a cytotoxic compound. 1 gram of cytotoxic product costs more than 2 to 3 crores, for example. Then even the 1 gram matters for us for the process. So in that case, reconciliation is very much important. Always ultimately we need to achieve 100% is the expectation. If not, it should not be less than at least 95%. Always they keep 100 as a middle point, 95 to 110 as the ballpark figure for getting the yield, percentage of yield. How you can get more? Since you given 100 grams, how you can get more than 100 in the yield? Yes, that is possible. The reason is, if you properly fill it with a lower dosage. For example, there will be a fill volume set. You have to fill, instead of 50 mg, there will be a volume will be fit that it should be from 50 to 60 mg is the fill volume. So you always fill with the 50 mg. Definitely there will be some remaining left. That will be giving you one more add-on. Okay, so let's take an example now, the coronavirus vaccine, right? So each dose is having 12 injections. Okay, 12 individual can be injected with the one vaccine, but the company gives you 10. One vial can be used for 10 persons. If a good nurse provide you the vaccination, they can make from one vial, instead of 10%, they can inject for 12%, which means that much properly if you're handling, you can minimize the wastage. So that two wastage can be converted as a yield if you're doing a proper activity. So that's a reconciliation will be coming to the higher side also. So make sure your areas are cleared of other lot information. This is very, very important. This is avoid the mix-ups. So if, for example, if you're doing a previous product, let's take the previous product is paracetamol product, or you can take ceftriaxone injection, and next product you're going to do as a cephalosporin injection. Okay, there is a difference in the molecule, right? The previous day molecule and the next day molecule. So in such case, this is called as a line clearance. So all the line will be cleared for the next usage. So the responsibility lies with production to make the clearance, and QA will evaluate the clearance. So QA will come and check all this, the line of use is been cleared from the previous material. Even the tapes or even the labels or even any carton boxes of the previous make, nothing should be there. So you are going to clear the area and ready for the next process. This is called the line clearance process. So that is particularly for the packaging, labeling, prior to work with another lot. So double check, as I mentioned, the double check will be done by the our QA person, IP QA, or the on shop floor QA. They call it as a shop floor QA as well. So warehouse, I think we touched about this warehouse already. It shall be clean. As I mentioned earlier, quarantine will be in yellow, release in green, and red in rejection. First in, first out. This is very important topic. Sorry guys, I think it takes some time to move the slide. Sorry, now it has been there. Yeah, so first in, first out. So what is meant by first in, first out? Any material which comes inside the premises the very first time, that should be going out first, which means that may be expiring very early, right? So you should use that material first in, first out. That is one of the concepts. We call it as FIFO, F-I-F-O, FIFO. The next concept is first expiry, first out. We call it as FEFO, F-E-F-O, which means first expiry, first out. Sometimes you may be getting from supplier, which may be getting expired in next 5 months. Okay, some remaining material will be kept hold for 1 year also. So in that case, your database, your electronic database of material management will alert you that this material is having a shortest expiry. So that prompt you to use that particular material before it getting wasted. So by manual process, it is very difficult for a person to manage the situation. So this automation will help them with the alarming, triggering the alarm, stating that next month these are all the materials is going to get expired. So in such way you will be alarmed, so you can try to use the first expiry, first out. So this is the automation, supporting, which helps us to manage the cost. So instead of wasting that material with our mind, we may be forgetting about this, and then we'll be losing the company. But that will be solved by the automation process. So tracking the inventory, okay, and sold lots. So this is once again about the reconciliation. Okay, so tracking inventories are either manual or software based. So most of them are moving towards the software based. Is it audible? Yeah. So most of them are moving towards the software based material management system, which is called as SAP. So next point we are going to use for the discussion is the laboratory area. So now initially we saw about the buildings, premises, then warehouse, production, and about the personal also we have touched. Now we are talking on the laboratory, QC part. So we'll have a specification. Of course, laboratory should have their own specification to test and release the product. Standards, sampling plans, testing procedures, all should be well written and approved within the department. Mostly QC will approve the, all the specification, other stuff, but QA will be also involved in the important decision making points. Next is they should have a proper calibration and maintenance program in place. What is a calibration? So any instrument which is being used for testing purpose should be calibrated periodically, right? So whether it's giving a right result or not. So that is the purpose of the calibration. And what is maintenance program? So sometimes there will be some parts within the instrument. Let's take an example. There may be some burning lights inside the FTIR, or maybe inside the UV there will be a lamp, UV lamp. So all these needs to be properly replaced during the maintenance program. Okay, it should be avoiding some errors when you're doing the testing result. For example, you forget to do the maintenance and you're not changed the light inside, and the light has been become expired or not in proper condition. Then you're doing an analysis and the results comes failed, and finally you go and check. Unfortunately, that's not the problem with the result and testing, but because of maintenance issue, then there is a loss, because the manpower is lost, the chemicals are lost, and your time lost, everything has been lost. So to avoid such practices, there will be a well defined, you know mm, uh, digitally enabled maintenance program alertness, like our alarm, how we keep alarm for the activities, right, reminders. So there is a calibration management software, preventive management software in place to make them to alarm to go for that particular maintenance program. So once you keep your machineries and instruments at proper condition, maintenance state, then you are not worried about the problems happen with the machinery side. So that issues will be ruled out, because when you are identifying the during the investigation, you have to think about all these external parameters, whether the maintenance programs are done at the right time adequately. If you miss the maintenance program, for example, instead of doing in the end of July, you may be forgot and done in the August, then it's a non-conformance. You are not followed your own procedure. Your procedure says you have to complete within 30th, 31st of July, but you are not done. Because of 31st July is a Sunday, you can't tell that I'll be doing on next day, Monday. Of course, some companies will be having plus or minus 3 days as a buffer. Even if you cross the buffer, then it's a non-conformance, then it's a deviation. So all these are required at documenting. Document all testings using the logbooks. Supervisor, if something goes wrong, this is very, very important. So you have to escalate anything which goes wrong, which is not, as per our intended result. You have to promptly explain the situation to the your superior. Don't be hesitated. They are not going to sack you or punish you for all these issues. You're going to tell them that yes, I done the following activities, I followed the same practice, but still the results are not coming. There may be a chance the product may be failed at the production side. It's not from your side. So always be very cautious that there is no any mistake happened from your end. As I given an example, if your procedure talks about up, drop the solution like 10 solution per minute or 10 drops per minute, follow the same thing. Don't be hurry to drop all the solution in within a minute and go for a non-conformance issues. Okay, so keep following what has been told in the procedure. That only is the expectation in the industry. What is in the procedure that you should follow blindly, because you are in the commercial side of the manufacturing process. Of course, when you are in the R&D, that scenario is different. You can do a trial and error check, but that should be well documented. But when you are in the commercial business, commercial manufacturing business, everything is fixed, everything is determined, everything is validated, everything is approved, so that you don't want to take any risk. Follow the written procedure. That's it. Your life is very easy. Okay, so don't continue with testing if done improperly. Example, suppose instead of doing something as described in the procedure, but you have not done as described in the procedure. Okay, then you stop the activity, tell that I done some mistake, I can't able to recollect what the mistake, but I don't want to continue, I want to start a new testing, new analysis. Good, drop that, take a permission with before coming the results. Any data, any result before coming, if you're aborting, that's good enough. But once the data has been generated and you stop the activity, then you have to do a lot of justification. The reason is, once the result is generated, that may be for pass or fail. And if it is fail, you have to do a series of quality checks, why it has been failed, how it has been failed, and a lot of questions comes as an investigation part. Any failure to be investigated in industry, similar to the police criminal investigation, the same level of high level investigation goes inside the pharma industry also, because it's not to punish someone, it is to rectify the issues, and that should not happen from others in future. Okay, there is a tendency the human can do error, so how to protect that in a proper way, that is the intention of all these exercise. If anything goes wrong, please escalate, there will be a right solution to that. Issues will be identified. That is the job of the supervisors and managers who is involved in this business. Okay, check results prior to discarding sample. Okay, you should not discard the sample until and unless the result is validated and approved by the superior. If it is not been checked, result is not been checked, then if you are discarding, then they may be thinking something you are doing intentionally, you are discarding the sample. So always don't discard the samples before getting the results. Have second person check. Usually the execution will be done by one person, reviewed by other person, and finally approved by the third person. So once you do some analysis, you will be signing as an analyst, as a done by. Your immediate supervisor will do a check, he will be checked by or reviewed by, and then finally a QC manager will do a approved by. So there will be always a 3 level of security checks, so that you don't worry, you're not doing any mistakes. But if you find any mistakes, correct yourself. If anyone finds your mistake at the next level, that shows that you have committed some mistake, and you should be able to rectify the mistake. Okay, it happens because no one is perfect in this world, right? So it happens some mistakes, but there is a level of mistake. It can't happen something at the very high level issues. Instead of doing some product A testing, you can't do a product B testing. That's a serious issue. Okay, so the risk of mistakes will purely depend on what is the level of issues you are bringing to the discussion. Okay, if suppose because of your mistake there is a 1,000 crore business loss, then the complete team is sacked, starting from you till the vice president of QA. Everyone will be getting sacked because the loss is too much. If the loss is less, the severity depends upon the loss. you will be getting penalized, or maybe given some additional training, or move to the other department. Something will happen. But be alert when we are doing some activities, because you are the responsible person for that particular activity, since you have signed on behalf of you. So that is your record. You have generated those documents. Okay, so stability testing will be done. Of course, stability testing, we have a separate chapter we can discuss at that stage. Stability means shelf life, identification of the shelf life of the product is a responsibility of laboratory, and the reserve sample will be kept for final products over the period of expiration date. So what is this reserve sample meaning? Once you do the commercial batch, the batch goes to the market and it has been circulated till the user end. It goes to the main distribution channel, and then carrying and forwarding team, and then it goes to the distribution center in the particular area, region, district. From state to district, it will come. From district to, it will go to the individual pharmacies, or maybe it goes to the hospitals. So this is the uh, logistics part, where the product reaches the user end. Okay, so till that time, you should hold, the QA will be kept hold some reserve samples of the same lot, same batch, to ensure that the product in the market is identical to the product which we kept in the reserve sample area. It's a it's a kind of a miniature sample, representative samples we can say. Okay, to prove that my sample which is in my custody will meet the all the requirements which is as in the market, as in the distribution channel. Okay, it may be in the hands of some end user, the patient, or maybe in the hospitals, or with the doctors, or in the pharmacy, or in the distribution channel, anywhere. Once you have the reserve sample, if any complaints come, for example, they come up with a complaint and tell that this product is having some impurities, then immediately what you can do, take that particular lot from your reserve sample, test it at your end, and prove it yes or no. If your result shows some impurities, then you go and tell to the complainant that yes, we got some impurities, you're right, so that we will try to do a product recall. Recall means getting back the products back to the industry. Okay, so this is it's a very bad situation for the company, but you can see the other side of the coin, like you voluntarily recalling, which means that you get a good impression that everyone talks about the company, that yes, you identified some problem, you are public conscious. Sorry guys, there was some disconnection in the line. I hope it's audible now. Yeah. So, so the purpose of reserve sample is to hold the mimic sample in the premises. Okay, and it will be challenged in future. So now we are going to talk about the documentation part. So as I mentioned, documentation is very important, because everything is documented, is completed, the activity is completed. Okay, records will be maintained like batch records, testing data, investigation documents, training documents, preventive maintenance document, facility maintenance document, cleaning documents, everything. So whatever you name it, that will be a documentation, either in electronic form or in a paper form. If it was not documented, then it did not been happen. Okay, so which means that if you are not documented, you have not executed that activity. Okay, so mostly all written in ink, which cannot be tampered or removed. So it should be legible pen should be used. There are colors to be used for that also. Usually, it's a company policy once again. So black color will be always used by all the documentation person. QA, you'll use the green color, and no one is allowed to use the green and red because of those are used by the regulatory agencies, right? So obviously, blue will be sometimes used by the QA professionals, and all other documenting persons will use the black color pen. But it is once again depends upon the company to company. So we are not. It's a guideline, but you can think about that. But you have to follow the company's practice. Okay, cross out with single line. Cross out with single line. Something like if you want to strike off the mistakes, you have to cross with a single line where the previous mistake should be legible. What you have written, for example, if you wrote instead of 2020 or 2021, you wrote 2020. So you have to cut that 2020 mistakenly you wrote as a one strike, and then you have to write 2021. So if someone sees that, they will find, okay, the previously written value was 2020 and it's a mistake, which is the negligible one, and now you written correctly as 2021 with initial and date, your initial and date. This is a common practice in the banking sector also. If you do any changes in the check, okay, the manager will ask you to sign on the particular place. The reason is you're authenticating that change, that you have done that change. Okay, if suppose you wrote like 2020 and someone has overwritten as 2021, that's a falsification of the data, right? So very important in the industry is about this falsification, manipulation, data integrity. All these keywords are very important in the industry. For example, you may be documented as 2020 in the 2020 time, but someone has been overwritten as 2021, which gives a misleading the data, the authenticity of the data. Okay, so no whiteout, which means you should not apply any whitener on the data, because it masks the legibility of the previously written data. Okay, so you should not use any whitener, or don't use scrap papers, which means you are not allowed to use any scribbling pads or anything inside the company. Okay, of course, non-GMP activities can be done with the scribbling pads. For example, if you're going for some training and you want to take some notes, that is allowed. But if you want to document the result of your pH meter or HPLC or something, you can't use your own rough note or maybe a kind of a scribbling pad to document the GMP records. So do not use scrap papers. Change control on all documents. So anything to be changed, that should be routed through a change control process. Of course, our module 7 talks about the change control process. We will deep dive into that discussion there. But as of now, change control means something you're changing from the existing. Let's take an example. You are changing a UV spectrophotometer from single beam to the double beam spectrophotometer. So that is a major change. Okay, that should be routed through a proper channel. You can't simply remove one old UV spectrophotometer and keep new spectrometer there. You have to justify a lot of things when you're removing from the practice. Okay, since it has been involved, that previous instrument is involved in the GMP activity, you can't able to remove or replace very quickly without a proper documentation part. So all this documentation requirement comes from the change control process. Okay, we call it as a decommissioning practice in the validation. Decommissioning means what? You're removing something from the active use to removing out from the existence, decommissioning. Okay, it's a retirement of that particular piece of instrument, we can call it as. So any retirement of instruments should be well documented, because these documents will be reviewed by the inspectors. All the documents are reviewed by the inspectors. That's the reason all GXP documents will be seen by the inspectors. That's the reason documentation should be legible, very clear, and should be demonstrable that you have done the job. Okay, so write down correct date. So I think we can see that in the good documentation practice as well. So I'm just skipping this. From with this year, we are completing this GMP basics, and we can take a 5 minutes break, 10 minutes break. Okay, so we are very generous with you guys, right? So 10 minutes break is allowed for you, and we will be starting the next session, good documentation practice, as per our next from the agenda. We have a good documentation practice. There we will talk more about the documentation skills, what is needed. The reason why I'm taking good documentation practice as the first step, because your documentation is the very important when you're doing in the premises, in the manufacturing process. Okay, take a 5-10 minutes break, and we'll join by 16:35. Thank you, team. Be online, don't get disconnected. Please be muted. We'll be joining back. Thank you so much. So, welcome back, guys. So, the next topic from our modules is about the good documentation practice. As I mentioned, the good documentation practice is very important in the pharmaceutical field, medical devices or biopharmaceuticals. Since anything has been documented, you are responsible for that. And when you witness as your signature has been there, so you will be the prime responsible for that particular piece of activities, whatever you have done, right? So so what we talk about in the good documentation practices, what are the document required and the definitions about the regulatory regulatory references of what is needed in the documentation, what are the records to be maintained and what are the good documentation practices to be followed in the industries. Okay. Why GDP is important? As I told, if you have not documented an activity, you have not done it. So that is very clear statement from any piece of the documentation part. So document all the activities performed. Do not perform the activity if it is not documented. So which means that if it is not documented in the procedures, don't do that additional activities. So follow what is being told in the procedure and the same should be documented properly. So, in definition, document an approved instruction either in paper or electronic form which guides about how an activity shall be executed. So, which is the flow of activity. It can be from the standard operating procedure, or it may be from the analytical data sheet, or it may be the validation protocol, or it may be some logbooks, checklist, whatever it may be. Anything, a piece of paper from the GXP data or the procedure which have the format number. Usually, all piece of document generated for the purpose of industrial activity. Okay, for example, manufacturing or its QC analysis, QA documentation, warehouse documentation, engineering documentation, maintenance documentation, whatever you name it, there is a format for that documentation, and that format carries a format number system. Okay, for example, form 1, form B, something like that. We call for, even for the income tax, we have right for form 15H or something like that. That is the documentation reference number. Okay, all document will carry that kind of reference number. When that carries that reference number, then that piece of document is being come under the custody of the GMP environment. So you have to follow this good documentation practices wherever you are documenting in any piece of formatted reference document. If you're documenting something in your notebook or diary, that is a different matter, where you can do your own scribblings and other stuffs, but not in the official documents, right? So records provide evidence that activities have been performed or results have been achieved. A record is often considered as a document. They always document the past. Okay, so it is the activities which is completed is been evidence in the document. So what is good documentation practice, right? So document must be accurate. Okay, so true, precise, and error free. That is very important, and concise, short and clear information that is understood by all. Legible, shall be readable, understandable. Traceable, who recorded, where, when, and how. So all the traceability on the document generation should be provided in the piece of document. So nowhere you can sign without a date, which means when you're signing the date, the piece of paper, always remember to put the date. Not only in the industry as well as in your routine practice, you have that whenever you sign anywhere, you try to. For example, if you generate any Google Forms or any kind of report generation from the software, there will be always a report generation will carry the author who has developed this report, name of the author, timestamp with date and time, and sometimes it will capture all the flow path, file path and other stuff also. Okay, but minimum requirement for us is date, time, and who has done this activity, author of the document. That is very important. Okay, the real time. Contemporaneous means real-time documentation. Documented at the time activity done. For example, if you're doing a pH meter, you are added the solution, you write you have added the solution of 2 ml or whatever maybe, and then perform the activity. You can't, for some extent, you can do some 2 to 3 steps together and go for a documentation. It is not like hard and fast rule for everything, stop the activity and come and record. So there is some set of sequence to be completed in a practical way. After completing that set of sequence in a practical way, then go for documentation. But don't extend the practical activity for more time, which may make you to forget about the first piece of information. For example, if you want to document a 5.78 grams you have been weighed, take the weigh, put into the conical flask or volumetric flask, then see the data, tear it. Okay, you should go for the tearing, right? Tear it, take the printout, generate the print, sign the print paper generated from the printout of the balance, immediately record it. Okay, that is the practice. It's not that I have to put something and write it back again and take the weighing without dropping into the conical flask. First, I have to write. First, complete the activity in a short sequence, then go for documentation. That is called contemporaneous activity done documentation part. Enduring, long lasting and durable. So whatever you document, it should be long lasting and durable, which means the pen you're using should be not a ink pen. Sometimes it should be a ballpoint pen, because sometimes ink pen sometimes get fade, right? So in that case, this is once again the company policies. Company will dictate you have to follow this procedure by using black ballpoint pen. Then you have to follow that. Okay, accessible, easily available and retrievable. Any document which has been generated should be able to pull back and see in a time less than 5 minutes. Okay, so your time to identify the location should be less than 5 minutes. Of course, that will take some time to reach to your table. That is a different scenario. But your accessibility should be in less than 5 minutes. That is the good record keeping practices. Okay, so principles of GDP. Document with original signature should never be destroyed. This is very, very important. Don't destroy any original paper without the consent, because if you're not signed, that's not your responsibility to discard or destroy the paper. That should be done or handed over to QA department. They will take the reasonable step how to destroy the document. Never falsify information. So you should not write a false data. This is very, very important. This is the reputation of your individual brand as well as for the company. There are many people in the industry, they done this kind of falsification and they are terminated from the services and they couldn't able to join in the different company for the purpose because they have been identified as the person who have done manipulation in the industries. Okay, so this will impact your personal identification and the career path as well as for the company. So you're doing the job. Okay, you're not doing something for your own or for some other stake, right? So whatever you do, you be in a transparent situation, do it properly. If any mistake happens, accept the mistake. Yes, this has been done by me. What is the next solution to provide? But don't repeat the same mistakes. You can do 100 mistakes, that's fine. But don't repeat the same mistake what you done earlier. Create a new mistakes. We can learn from that. But don't repeat the same mistakes. That is very important in the field. Never do whiteout. As I mentioned earlier, we should not use a whitener or a cover over tape. There are some new technologies to, there is a tape. We can mask the previous written data. Never obliterate information or record. So you should not tamper the record. Never overwrite a record. So you should not overwrite any data. There should be a simple strike legible with the old data and write a new data. Never use pencil. Use permanent ink for writing. Why we should not use pencil? It is always possible to erase it by someone and they can rewrite some new things. Instead of writing 4.5 pH, they may write 8.5 pH after erasing the 4. So this may lead to the intentional or unintentional changes of data. So pencil is not at all allowed inside the premises. If any inspectors saw the erasers, whitener, pencil, then that is a serious time for the company. For what purpose you are using all these, elements in the industry? Okay, so that's why people will never have pencils or erasers or whiteners in the industry, particularly with all these kind of regulated markets. No space, lines, or fields are left out blank. There should not be any left out blank. I know you might be knowing the reason. If anything left blank, any other person can fill the data, which may lead a mislead information. So, in case if you don't have something to write there, please write not applicable or put any kind of informations as guided by the industry. Every company have their own practice. Sometimes they tell you to put NA. Sometimes they tell you to cross for all the lines. So there are different ways of making this identification for the blanks, avoiding someone to write some data inside that. Never use symbols like ditto marks. People try to use, for example, not available, put below dot 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 or something like that. That is not allowed in the industry. Keep writing individually all the blanks as not applicable, not applicable, not applicable till wherever you find it. Never use symbols, as I mentioned. Okay. So observations on poor documentation practice. So these are some examples where you can know that these are the wrong practices. Missing signature and dates at the time of activity was performed. As I mentioned, people will be very cautious and busy in performing the analytical activity because they are interested in doing analytical activity, but they won't do the documentation part. Okay, as I mentioned, if you do all the perfect analytical activity and you have not done the documentation, it shows that you have not completed the activity. Okay, so as soon as you have done the activity, documentation is very important to complete the process, because in industry people works in shift. So once you complete the activity, you left for the day, the other people will come and do some other activity. So you should not left something out. You should not left something unattended and left without documenting in a proper way. Okay, so non-uniform date and signature. So company will establish a uniform date process. For example, some companies will follow DD YYYY. Some companies will follow DD YYYY. Some companies will follow DD/YYYY. So it depends upon the industry practice. You have to adopt the company practice to follow that. Okay, because you know that February 2nd you write 0202. Okay, but in US the month will come first and the date will follow the next. So there is always a cultural barrier in all these kind of formatting. So to make a unique formatting, all these basic principles should be adopted in the industry. Activity was performed and writing on one day and signed on another day. For example, you do the activities everything today, and at the end of the day, due to the shift bus is going, so you drop everything and go because you don't find any other vehicle to go. By that time, you will be doing the documentation part by the next day. That is a wrong practice. Okay, you can justify that you have done up to the 6 o'clock my work. I completed my work, but documentation I can't able to do today. I have to supposed to do tomorrow one day. It is agreed in a hypothetical way, but not in a documentation and in the business environment as well as in the GMP environment. Do on the same day and go. If not, you don't want to complete the complete process. If you plan accordingly your activity to start at what time, and you can comfortably close at before you wind off the activities. Okay. Blank spaces, I already mentioned. You should not leave any blank spaces. Illegible writing. So we have some examples of illegible writing we'll come across. Too many corrections. There should not be many corrections. Writing overs. Okay, writing overwritings it is called. Multiple line through. So don't strike off multiple times like you're doing in the college or in the school days. Error corrections, not signed and date. If anything has been correction is done for the errors, definitely this should be signed and date with the reason for the correction. For example, if you're correcting a date, okay, then that should be countersigned by your supervisor also. Sometimes it is very important. The reason is, if you're changing the date and signing different date, there will be a question that on what basis this issue has been happened. So there should be some third person to witness that yes, it's a wrong entry of the date. Okay. For example, if my specification of pH is 4.5 to 5.5, and I mistakenly wrote 6.5, and I want to write it 5.1. I wrote 6.1 mistakenly, but I want to write as 5.1. My actual result is 5.1, but I wrote mistakenly 6.1. But my limit is 4.5 to 5.5. So my data which I wrote is out of my limit, which is out of the specification, what I wrote, which is a failure data. But I cut that failure data and I write it 5.1. Okay. When seeing the data, the auditor's perception is something has been failed, which is out of the limit, and you try to make it to come back within the limit. So you adjusted the quality of the data to pass it, which means some data is failing, but you intentionally you are passing the data. So that is the perception in the mind. So how you correct this kind of value? For example, you want to write 5.1, but you wrote 6.1 mistakenly. That is an unintentional error you made it. In such case, you have to write information that uh, uh, with the evidences. For example, if it's a paper generation data, the printout is coming from the pH meter, take and provide that this is the pH meter data recorded and the entry was been unintentionally made here with 6.1. Okay, and it should be countersigned by the supervisor. So these are all the issues when you do some wrong entries. So always be careful in writing the entries in the documentation. Every piece of writing, you think that is a checkbook, your bank checkbook. How carefully we will write the values, right? So similarly, you spend your time. Don't be hurry. Take your relaxed time. Be peaceful. Don't overload yourself. Do a work properly. Whiteout, of course, it's not been accepted. Error correction, I think we discussed now. Non-traceable, it should be traceable. Everything should be traceable. And data integrity, we'll discuss as a separate topic. Data integrity is a huge topic again. Okay, now we talk about the benefits of GDP. Compliance to regulatory, because no observations, no warning letter, no serious issues with the company. So if you're good documentation practice, it's not one person's job, it's a complete company's job, right? So everyone should be following the good documentation practices. That build confidence on system and practices. So less error, no error, your system is in the controlled environment for you. Correct, complete, current, and consist information. So all these are very important when you're having a good documentations. Effectively meets customers and stakeholders requirements. Also, your customers will be satisfied when there is a less or zero documentation errors. Ensure the traceabilities. Very important. The package of data, whatever you create, it should be having a traceability of piece of evidences. For example, if you have 10 set of different analysis you have done, and that should be all traced with the proper reference and attachment of the printouts. So that is the proper traceability. Useful for review, investigation, and CAPA. So this is the benefits of good documentation practice, as I mentioned earlier. If you have done any mistakes or investigation, the date, time, and all other information will be there in the benefit for us during the investigation. So which is very similar like your attendance in the college, right? So you do a biometric access, right, which shows that you have been present inside the college. So that is the piece of evidence that shows that you have been inside the premises from this time to this time. That is the data. That is a traceability. Yeah. So useful for review, of course, for investigation and CAPA. Solve complicated problems. If all the data have been traceable, evidences are available, the complication of investigation and the problem solving is very quick. Reduce or eliminate assumptions and second guessing. So if it is not been well documented, there will be always the doubt whether it is done on this date or that day. Okay, I signed, but I didn't put the date. Maybe I done on Thursday or Friday. So all these doubts will come. So we can exclude all these with the proper documentation. Eliminate the need to re-ask the same questions. So this is very, very important. When the inspector takes the document and he see the document, there should not be any question should be asked by the inspector. So your document should speak to the inspector. So there should not be a question. He should ask, where is this document missing? Where is this not provided? So none of the questions should be coming from the inspector's side. All evidences, traceability should be there. If he is having doubt, you just show, yes, it is there. Yes, it is here. Yes, it is mentioned. That's it. You don't want to explain him a full story, which means that your practice is inadequate. If you are explaining every stories to the inspector, your practice is inadequate. Your practice is not speaking on its own. The practice should speak on its own, right? That is the systems and practices needed. Specify clear instruction to staff. That is very important. Okay. Consistent quality, yield, and performance of staff. So when you do a good documentation practices, the quality remains consistent, and your productivity will be increasing, and performance of the staff will be very much escalated. The thing is, during a monthly review, there will be a process called monthly review. At that time, they will trace out how many documentation errors are happening in QC, in QA, in warehouse. So mostly this is the place where your performance will be rated. Okay, in QC department, there are 20 people are working and there is like zero documentation error. That's proud for the team, right? So that is very important. Of the references here, it's mentioned that Q7 is it from ICH Q7. ICH stands for International Conference of Harmonization, and Q stands for quality. Q7 is the sequential number. There is Q1, Q2, Q3, something like that. And Q7 is the applicable guidelines from ICH on GMP for active pharmaceutical ingredients. So this is the Q7 reference. You can find the GMP for active pharmaceutical ingredients. It can be chemically synthesized, biotechnologically synthesized, or maybe any fermentation based synthesized. So all GMP for API being provided in the Q7 document. All these are available in the internet, which is free of cost. Okay. Documentation system and specification. All documents should be provided, reviewed, approved, and distributed. So none of the document should not be left without signature or any traces of a reference. It's not possible to sign all the pages, I agree, but if any one page is there, one page document is there, but it is without sign, then who is the owner of the document? Okay, that is the question. So all documents should have some traceability, authenticity, and data tracking of traceability of the activities what we have recorded in that particular piece of paper. That is very important. The issuance, revision, supersedings, and withdrawals of all documents should be controlled with the revision histories. For example, now you are using one piece of logbook. There will be some upgradation, and then the version will be changing. So at that time, the old version should be retrieved, and you have to use new version in the existence. So old version should be obsolete. After you complete the training, the old version document should be removed from the site, and it should be in the custody of the QA. Okay, new format will be issued. This eliminates a wrong usage of the records. A procedure should be established for retaining until specified retention periods. It is obvious that we can't store all the documents for more than certain years. I can't hold 20 for a document for 20 years, right? So company is having a standard, and that has been accepted by the guidelines and regulations, that after expiry of the product, 5 years can be hold the data. For example, if the product is manufactured in 2020, okay, that data should remain for at least for till 2025 or 2026. Beyond that, once the batch is completed, the product is not existing in the market. Everything has been completed. There is no any issues in the product. Then your system can take a leverage to destroy those papers from the site, which is 6+ years of 6+or 5+1 years of completion of the years after the expiry. So 2 years, 2 years of 2 years in the market, and then plus 5 years. So total 7 to 8 years the document will remain. Okay, but some companies, what they do, still they want to avoid this destruction. They used to outsource to the third party. They bundle all these piece of documents, well protected, give it to the third party for the storage purpose. So they store it with them and they provide you when they need it because of space constriction or whatever may be the reason. So this is the practice they follow to have a controlled environment. That piece of documents will be somewhere in the custody with third party at least. Okay, when entries are made in records, okay, these should be made indelibly in spaces providing for such entries directly after performing the activities, and should identify the person making the entry. So, who has done the activity, when he has done the activity, what he has done, everything should be very clearly recorded. Correction to entries should be dated and signed, and leave the original entry legible. As we discussed, any previous entry should be visible and legible to the inspectors, whoever reviews the document. During the retention period, okay, original or copies of records should be readily available. So the retention period is something like the active period where the product is still in the market. Okay, so by that time your data also should be readily available for any kind of investigations. So next we are talking about in the same Q7 documentation and records, equipment cleaning and usage record. Okay, so major equipment use, cleaning, sanitization, sterilization, and maintenance should show the date, time, product, and batch number of each processed batch in the equipment. So as I mentioned earlier, if you are using any equipment for some activity, all these traceable documents should be available for the particular piece of equipment and the person who performed the cleaning and maintenance. So who has cleaned the equipment? Maybe a housekeeping person. His sign should be there in the document. If equipment is dedicated to manufacturing one intermediate or API, these individual equipment records are not necessary. This is something very important. When you have a dedicated use of piece of instrument or equipment, then you can exclude this kind of documentation practice, because it is obviously there won't be any cross contamination, but most of the company even will follow the cleaning practice or cleaning activities for the dedicated piece of instrument. Even the equipment is dedicated. They have a logbook writing that morning I switched on this time, shut down that time, and done the process of some batch with batch number reference, followed by start this time and end by this time for the cleaning activities. So there is different types of cleaning, okay, in the industry. Very simple cleaning, medium complex cleaning, highly complex cleaning, okay. So they will write type A, type B, type C. So which cleaning they perform. So it's a type A cleaning. If it's a very simple cleaning, they put type A cleaning. It's a complex cleaning, go for a type C cleaning. It's a difference. There is a difference between the cleaning process for a better quality of the cleaning. Okay, that is the differences in the type A, type B, type C. Okay, in case where dedicated equipment is employed, the records of cleaning, maintenance, and use can be a part of the batch record or maintained separately. What I was telling the same. Sometimes the industry practice that will be referred in the batch record, or they have their own piece of records of raw materials, intermediates, API, labeling, and packaging material under the section 6.3. Okay, these are all specific words taken from the guidelines. Records should be maintained including the name of the manufacturer, identity and quantity of each shipment, of each batch of raw material, intermediates or labeling and packaging material for APIs, and date of receipt. So when you are purchasing any material from the supplier, all these pieces of documents should be available as a data sheet from the supplier, and that should be reviewed and approved by QA and controlled with the warehouse team. This is the industry expectation. Everything is for the traceability purpose. Inspection and test, status of incoming material, records tracing the use of materials, documentation of testing and review of conformity with specification, status approved or rejected. So sometimes most of the companies follows with a manual method. Most of the companies go with the electronic based SAP concept they use with a which is called like a material inventory management in the SAP model. So master approved labels should be maintained for comparison. So there will be always the approved label will be kept hold with the QC for the comparison purpose. So again, we are talking about the same quality 7 Q7 document where where you will be having this batch record and control record. This is called BPCR, batch production and control record. This is the full complete picture of the batch process for the particular batch number. Okay, actual results recorded for critical process parameter. I will talk about the critical process parameter. This is a key word in the industry, which means that the parameter is completely dependent on that particular process. Okay, which means temperature. I want to maintain at 5 degrees the temperature. The R&D person will tell this is very critical to monitor at 5 degree. There should not be any deviation. Then that is a critical process parameter. If they tell you have to set the RPM of the machine at 5000 RPM, then only you can get the good product. Then it is a critical process parameter. If they tell you have to maintain the temperature at pH at 4.5 always for 2 hours or 3 hours, then that is a critical process parameter. So these are the evidences will always be listed in the document, and the critical process parameters are easily identifiable in the batch record. There will be bold and italics. That is the identification that this portion of testing parameters are important for this batch. So obviously a person or operator will come to know that this is a piece of important activity to be followed in the execution batch. Process parameter, as I mentioned, temperature is there, pressure is there, pH is there, and signatures of the person performing directly supervising or checking each critical steps in the operation. And one more critical thing is all critical process parameters points to be witnessed by the second person. So this is a security reason. The industry is practicing that one person doing the activity for the particularly on the critical process parameter, the next person visit and verify the activity. Yes, it is fine. In-process and laboratory test results, as we mentioned that there will be always an in-process check to prove that the quality is being obtained during the different stage of the process. Actual yield at appropriate phases or time. So this also we discussed. So there will be a monitoring by the laboratory that whether at every stage there is a required actual yield has been appropriately achieved by that particular phase or during that process. Description of the packaging and labeling, it is very important. Any deviation noted, its evaluation, investigation conducted if appropriate for reference of that investigation. Everything should be well documented. So investigation document, most of the companies we found, there is a lot of errors in the investigation document. The reason is people are very poor in the investigation of the documents. Why? Because they don't know much about the depth of the scenario. The reason they are not well trained, or maybe they are not having previous experience, or whatever may be the reason. So that is the reason there is a lot of non-conformance comes in the investigation record. Okay, so now we are talking about the laboratory control records where the documentation is very important. So laboratory control records should include complete data derived from all the tests conducted to ensure compliance, a description of the samples received for testing, including the material name or source name, batch number, any distinctive code, internal reference code, whatever you term, that should be readily available in the traceability area. Date of sample is very important. where appropriately it has been kept, where it has been stored, whether it has been stored in the designed place with the adequate temperature, quantity and date of sampling received. So all these pieces of information should be either in a paper form, or nowadays it's coming through a electronic laboratory record note form. So they call it as ELN, electronic lab note. So this is the place where there is a convergence of IT field in the pharma industry. So this makes our life very easy, because you don't want to go and take a paper and write and save the document, but everything goes with the electronic version. And once you log in and log out, that will take your timestamp and your entry in the piece of activity, whatever you've done. So statement of reference of to each test method used. So all the traceabilities and the reference methods you're using. Statement of the weight or measure of samples used for each test is as described by the method. So all these are the data, whatever is the critical data from the laboratory side will be captured, and either in the manual based or in the electronic version. That is mandatory. Complete record of all raw data generated during each test, in addition to graph, reports, and spectrum, HPLC data or UV data, everything should be a complete package, should be a data should be provided and kept with the traceabilities. Okay, sometimes you will be using some reference standards, reagents, standard solutions, some volumetric solutions. So all these will be having its own identity or nomenclature or reference ID that should be cross-referenced whenever you're using. Let's take an example. You're using a the standard solution you prepared, working standard they call it as sometime. You prepared on last month, and it is going to expiry within 2 months, and then you have to provide a name or number for that piece of working standard. So that number, when you're taking some sample from that working standard, you have to give identification to that number. This is the product details, and this is the identification number of that working standard, because that validity of the working standard remains for only 2 months, right? So that evidence should be captured in the data. So now I'm going to the next slide, where it's a continuation of the laboratory record as well. All records of all calculations performed in connection with the testing, including, for example, unit of measures, conversion factors, and equivalence factors. Everything should be well documented. But most of the time nowadays, many companies follow the ELAB notebook system, which avoids the human calculation errors. The signature of the person who performed each test and the date they performed. So if it's a manual record, manually you have to sign. If it's a digital record, you have to sign electronically. So digital, the second sign is very important, as I mentioned, as a reviewer sign. The date and signature of a second person who is reviewed for accuracy, completeness, and compliance with established standards. So he is a checked by person or reviewed by person, we call it as analyzed by, reviewed by, or checked by. The second person also can do the same operation, either manual document or it's an electronic document. Electronically by electronic signature, manually by manual signature. Complete record should also maintain for any modifications of any established analytical method, periodic calibration of all laboratory instruments, all stability testing performed on APIs, out of specification documents. So all these are very key documents in the pharma laboratory industry, laboratory control records. So now we are moving to GMP good documentation requirements. So keep in mind that after the product is released and shipped to the customer, what remains behind is the document. So everything, all the products manufactured goes out of premises, but full data with the document only remains with you. So your documentation record is useful to us only if it is 100% accurate. If anything goes wrong when it has been in the market, you have to go back and trace. Then your 100% data is required to fetch the investigation properly. So it is important for us to understand and follow the good record practices as well. So poor documentation. Why do sometimes fail to document activities, events poorly? What is the reason can be for a person to do a mistake? Obviously, following are the reasons, right? First, people don't clearly understand what or when to document. So this is the problem with the understanding of the people what to do and when to do. Procedure may not be completely understood or followed. People may not follow the procedure completely. They are not followed it 100%. People are not always held accountable. They are not accountable for the activity what they are doing. People will make mistakes. That's common. Okay. People don't always make corrections properly. People do not relate records to auditing. People do not understand the legal role of documentation. So these are the many failures for the documentation errors. So people should be very focused when they are doing some documentation, because all any piece of data entered into the document will be a questionable for you. If it carries your sign, you will be responsible. Okay, even if it is carries or checked by supervisor's sign, even he is responsible, but the blame starts from you, that you are the person documented. Of course sometimes you will be having little flexible because you are new person, or that's the reason we have a check by person to know the issues, right? So if he has not done the job properly, there will be a kind of alert for him that you have to do a cautious work, something like that. So it completely impacts the chain of trust, as well as the chain of hierarchy, from the analyst to the vice president of the quality as well. Record keeping system, how to maintain the record: bound notebook, pre-numbered. There should not be any loose sheets. Sometimes even if you're using the loose sheet, that would be controlled, pre-numbered, and issued with the QA signatures. So any piece of paper does not be generated from your own. That should be controlled and issued by someone. Okay, every register's form shall have format number, control number, and header, as I mentioned earlier. So any piece of GMP document will have a format number at the bottom or at some part of the piece of the paper. Date of opening and date of closing. When you use the register, there will be always issue date. When the register is issued to you, and when you started using it, and when you completed the complete book and returning back, and the table of content wherever applicable. So all these are for the traceability purpose in the documentation. Record writing, data entry: enter a complete and accurate information at the time work is performed. Enter signature or initials. When one or more persons complete the task, all person must sign. Okay, if three persons involved in one work, it is not advisable only one person to do the sign. All three should do this execution, sign off in the document. Never sign your name or performance of a job for work actually performed by someone else. This is very critical point. It is not that since you have not done the job, you should not sign for others activity. Okay, I am doing this activity there, so please sign for me this year. You don't know what activity you are doing by the time. Okay, so never ever commit a mistake like this. These are all like offensive mistakes. It's been considered as an intentional errors. Limit the use of abbreviations and acronyms. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, use a ballpoint, blue or black colored, depends upon the company. Don't use gel pens, ink pens, or for making entries. These are all companies' policies sometimes. Don't use pens like red color, ink color, green ink, or something like that. Pencils are avoided. Space and cells cannot be left blank, as we discussed already. Either you have to write not applicable in full way, or n/a, whatever is possible way. Never use dittos. I think we discussed also this in the previous slides. Never use lines to show continuation of the values or entries in a column or row. Never mask the original entry, as we discussed. Don't use whiteness or something, liquid tapes, material, something. Yes, here you can find some error corrections, right? How to do the error correction. So let's for an example, the person has written here 2135, okay, and then he made it as 6, or that's an incorrect error correction, and then 6211, and then that has been the last digit has been turned to again 1, from 2 to 1. So these are all basic silly errors will be done by the students as well. Even in the industries, we used to see this kind of errors. People may think that out of 1,000 pages, somewhere I wrote in one page, no one can able to identify. But always, it's very lucky that inspectors will find the right page where the flaws are there. Okay, so the problem is we don't know what really written there. Okay, and you can see the other part how they have corrected it properly. So write it properly with the signature and date. That is important. Never vary your initial or signature. So there should not be any variation in the signature in this kind of specifically when there is a cutting the data and putting the sign. The reason is someone can use your signature to forge it. Okay, this is a serious warning issue in the industries because many has done that kind of issues, and that is severity is very high in that case. Okay, how to make a corrections? So as I mentioned, you can see the weight of ingredients is it is written as 14.5 earlier, but actual result is 14.75. So it is always acceptable to cut this very legibly. Okay, there is no, don't deface the original entry. It is very legible that 14.5 is the previous data. Okay, if the auditors see this kind of corrections, they will never ask any questions. But if you adjust something in the same entry, then the auditor will ask thousands of questions. They go back to the issuance record. They go back to the other inventory record. So when this error repeated in all the trace of document, okay, that gives the information that you made some mistake in the process, and that may be an intentional one. Since intentional, you have been gone to the all the levels for changing the data. This is a serious issue. Don't do this ever in the industry. GDP error description. So sometimes they will be writing the error description, whether it's calculation error or transposition error, illegible entry or wrong entry. For example, today is 13/7/2021. Sometimes we will be thinking about the yesterday date and suddenly we'll start writing 12/07/2021. So it's a wrong entry of the date. Okay, so you can simply write entry error. Some companies will have the E.E, they will write. It's a short form of entry error. It is understood that it's an entry error, and accordingly they can go for the correction. Okay, it's all driven by the systems in the companies. And now you can see whether it is 27 or 29 or 24 or 2%. This is the illegible way of writing the data. So please be aware when you're writing, it should be very clearly written. Okay, sometimes when you see the foreigners writing, so this kind of errors will happen. Okay, so sometimes they write 4 in such a way that it looks like 9 as well. Okay, sometimes as 7 as well. So legible writing is very important, and that is to be practiced in the industry always. So that may be, as I mentioned sometimes back, if it is going to impact the specification. For example, suppose this is a final product and the specification is 27, 29 is acceptable. If it is 24, whether it is acceptable or not. So this will go for repeating the test again, redo the activity, time consuming job, and it will be cost of the poor quality. This is called cost of poor quality. Always try to write in caps. That will save some of the errors. It will reduce some of the errors. So good documentation practice, printouts sometimes generated from the thermal paper. There is a paper where the thermal paper which don't work with the inkjet printers. Based on the heat, there the color will come. The black color will come in the paper. Okay, so that is called thermal paper printing. There won't be ink will be there in that. It's a lifetime usage without the ink, but the paper is thermal based. When the heat is being passed in that paper, that particular piece of place will get color change into black. So that will be looking as a printout with the data. But during a long course of time, maybe like 6 months or a few months later, 3 months later, that color will get fade and it will become like white paper. I think you might be seeing this credit card bills and all. After a long time, you can open and see there will be nothing will be there. So that is the thermal paper based printouts. Okay. So if any critical data are taken with that kind of thermal printer paper, you should be taking a photocopy of that and archive it for the future use. Okay. Original shall be destroyed after verification, or sometimes people will attach the original along with that. Even if it is faded for after 6 months, no worries. That will be attached together with the paper, with the original. Use polyvinyl alcohol based gums or white glue for pasting of graphs. Okay, so this is for pasting of graphs. Sometimes they will use this. Use clear transparent tape or mending patch up. So for sticking of things, you should use a proper paste. Sorry, the sellotapes where some data should not be hidden because of you are using non-transparent tapes. Documentation practice don't do. Okay, what are the things you should not do? These are all very important in front of inspections. Don't remove any pages or portion from a notebook. This is very bad habit. You can't tamper the record and remove it. That is very, very serious non-conformance. Do not make any temporary entries in a bit of paper on or hand. You should not keep any small papers, evidence of data, even for your reference purpose or whatever may be. That is a bad habit, because these are the points already the inspectors had been identified. One of the person wrote is value, balance value in the what is this called, uh, mm, hand, where he wear the gloves. Over the gloves, he wrote the value, and the auditor was asking, "What is that value?" He told that I should not forget, so I written in my gloves. So that's a poor practice, right? You can't do that. So if it is a value and you should not forget, go and write in the right place. That is the GMP requirement, good documentation practice requirements. Preserve the notebooks intact. So do not lose the papers as well as the complete notebook as well. Do not use sticky notes. Very, very risky. If you are using sticky notes with any error, you may forget to remove that, and that will be get caught in the eyes of inspectors. When regulatory auditors are coming, they will check those papers and they understand what is the concept behind the sticky notes. Okay. Do not backdate or post date. So don't go and sign on backdate. Okay. Very classic example. There was an audit. I was doing an inspection audit for one of the Johnson and Johnson company, and I found there was a backdated data. How I can able to find that there is a backdate? Per person after completing the data, they took a photocopy. Okay, Xerox. They made a photocopy and attached it. But in the photocopy, there is no there is this date is not appearing. But after that, the person has signed on, let's take an example. Fifth, the person has photocopied. Seventh, the other person has signed. That photocopy also having there. In that, the particular sign was not there. But the person has done a back date. It shows that he thought that this paper has not been taken any photocopy or somewhere has been gone to the some other purpose, and he has done backdated. So always please be noted, backdated or postdated. We don't know the condition of the document, where it went, where it been circulated, to whom all it has been witnessed for some other purpose. So very, 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 very unsafe activity or bad attitude of doing backdated activity. Do not use asterisks that may cause confusion, such as using the same asterisk for different footnotes. Sometimes in the industry practice, there was a asterisk, keeping asterisk or hashtag somewhere and giving a reference there. That may confuse sometimes, but still this is in practice. If it is overloaded with many asterisks, then it is really confusing. Do not transcribe data. Okay. Avoid using unbound laboratory notebooks. So it should be completely intact notebooks. Creating and rewriting records. Recreating or rewriting should be avoided. Okay, this is very, very bad practice. If necessary to do this, the supervisor and QA approvals are required when recreating any records. If it is intentionally, you have to do some re-execution of the data. There is a procedure how to handle the rewriting, recreating the record. Accordingly, you have to follow the procedures from QA. So any clarification, QA is the person to provide you the clarification. It is important it is important to identify the recreated document as rewrite and reference the source of the information. So there should be a tag that this has been rewritten for certain purpose with some reference documentation number. Maybe you raised a deviation, so you refer the deviation number there. Record can be recreated only when the original record is legible. You should have the original record. An incorrect form or document was used. Maybe you, instead of using version 3, you might be used version 2. Good. But you can, you done a mistake, you do a rectification, take a deviation, rectify the mistake. How we can avoid this in future is very important. And take a new version 3 and do the same exercise, write it properly there. The record is repairable, then the original was in a format, then that would not keep thermal paper strip. Okay, so as we discussed, the original, if it is in a format of thermal paper, then you can go for the duplication of that. That's a rewriting or reprinting the data. Okay, lab record. So enter enough details of the, so the document can be understood in the future. So always give more information so documents have been understood properly. Documents should be signed off and dated by the person who performed the test. A reference to the identification of the sample analyzed should be included. Witness checked and reviewed by. So the second check, when one person performed the task and the second person verifies it has been performed correctly, that is the witness by person. Double checking your work provides additional assurance that no mistakes were made. As I mentioned, when you're giving your data to the supervisor, next to supervisor who is going to review, his job is to purpose of the job is to review completely to avoid any surprises when it goes for the next review. Okay, so they have to do their job adequately. Sometimes they rely on you and they tell, okay, I have confidence on you, so you might be done a very good job, so I'll go for a correction. That is a risk for you as well as for him. So avoid that practices. Give a time, do that activity, and complete that, ethically that process. Double checking your work provides additional assurance that no mistakes were made. So you can do your own double check after completing your document. Please take that, go back, like how we do for the examinations, right? Whether we have written our roll numbers and date correctly and the question numbers correctly. This is the way you have to verify the document as well once you completed your activities. The person who is the verifier must be clear. So what to verify by affixing their signature. So he should know that what is the purpose of his review. So it's not something like for the purpose of second sign is going to do this activity. He has to take it very seriously. All the evidences, whatever he provided, are consistent. Reviewer must be a second person. Signature of the person verified is important. Verify within a time frame. For example, if you've done the job today, at least within 2 days it can be done. It could not be made like 2 months later. Okay. Review what documents he will be reviewing by BPR, test records, material issuance, cleaning records, and calibrations and equipment raw data and yield and calculations, so on. So these are the documents will be reviewed by the second person as well. Review of the original record when the records are complete after complete analysis of a sample has been performed. So usually either it can be a complete analysis has been completed, or maybe complete specification analysis also been completed. It depends. At least you should be having within a time frame of within a 2 to 3 days that review part should be completed. All raw data, all printed electronic data such as chromatograms, spectrum photos or spectrum graphs, weight prints, this can be done on a sheet where all results have been summarized. So all these should be pasted properly and real-time signature to be placed on the document. If a notebook is no longer used and unused pages are remaining, then you should able to cross all the unused page and write the remainder of the page not used. Notebook is not in use. Sign with date. This happens mostly when you're going for next new year. Until December 31st, 2021, they use a separate document. When they go for the new year, sometimes some companies will follow all the documents in a new freshly issued document. But some companies go with the routine. After 31st, they will start working on the December 31st. they will start working with the same notebook for 1st of January. But some companies will follow a different scenario. By the time the left pages should be kept blank, will be strike off with the proper informations. You can write that due to the year closure, this document has been closed, something like that. Everything should be written. You should be having the capability what we have to write in the place for that purpose, for that particular reason. Should be very clear for them. Okay, so during the checking process, what are the following to be reviewed? So missing records and output prints, for example, there is any records are being not attached, incomplete entries should be verified, illegible corrections, if you overwritten, that is the place where the person should highlight you, sorry, don't do this job, go for a proper correction. Cross references, have you given a proper cross reference of use of reference standards or any pipettes, volumetric solutions, whatever may be. Deviations, if any deviations, you are being referred that properly. Valid calibration due dates. For example, if you are using pipette, micro pipette, we call this as micro pipette. I think hope you might be seen in your college. So that will dispense the respective volume. So that also should be validated or calibrated. So that calibration due date is very important when you are using for the critical analysis. So when you use the micro pipette, that reference ID should come along with the calibration due date. So this is the traceability for that particular piece of micropipette used for that particular analysis. So compliance with the specification is important. All testings should comply with the specification. If it fails the specification, the product is not able to be approved, it will be rejected. Okay. Parameter ranges or acceptance criteria are tighter with the customer specification. So these are the reviews should be done by the second person. So there are some examples of deviations. Yes. So incorrect charging of raw material, you have to raise the deviation because you have done a wrong charging of the material. Temperature, pressure, vacuum parameters outside the defined limit. So anything goes out of the required specification, you have to raise a deviation. Operator instructions not correctly followed. If you have not followed the written procedure, you have to raise the deviation. Breakdown of equipment or failure of utilities. Suddenly you are doing some activity. There is a power failure is there sometimes, but it has been well documented. There is a allowable limit for the power failures in the industries. Okay, within two minutes or 1 minute, they have to resume it. But in case of analytical instruments, they should be always backed up with the UPS. The reason all are computerized systems, they should not be anytime the software is get turned off, which will lose the analytical information. Will lose the analysis data also. So that's why all the computerized systems will be backed up with the UPS power supply. Equipment out of calibration, you have to raise the deviation. Records not completely adequately completed. Of course, you have to raise the deviation. In-process control limits not achieved. Sometimes in-process control limits not achieved will not go to the deviation until it is being supported. If it is, for example, I can wait for 2 hours, my pH should come within the limit. Okay, it's not come. In process check, pH not come, then there will be allowable next 2 more hours to reach the pH. If it is mentioned in the document, test the pH for 2 hours. If not reached to the required limit, then again test for next 2 hours. Then it is not a deviation. If you are testing for the second time, again test for 2 hours. After that also, if it is not meeting, then it is deviation. Anything is well written in a safe side for a second check, that will not consider as a deviation. I hope you got the point, right? So if it has been written second time, you can eligible to do the pH check, then it's not a deviation. But if you're going for the third time, then it's a deviation. Extraneous contamination of API intermediates. For example, you are using some O-rings, they will be calling as O-rings. Okay, it's a mechanical part, so everything will have a gasket. So some gasket may provide some kind of particle generation. That is extraneous contamination. Then obviously that will go for a serious deviation. Okay, any other planned, unplanned event. So anything you're not planned is an unplanned event. In such case, you have to raise a deviation. So we'll talk more closely on the deviation chapter in the deviation management section. Okay, so good documentation practice. Again, errors or mistakes are possible. As I told, to err is human, right? Person recording is human correction, corrective action and preventive action is important. List of the documentation, errors, mistake, deviations, classify and train the person who has done the mistakes, correction wherever possible, report the deviation to a QA, investigate and root cause analysis, perform the root cause analysis, understand the issue and take proper corrective action. So whenever the error happens, I always welcome to go for the proper investigation and solve the issue. So you can make multiple mistakes, but don't make the same mistake. Okay, multiple mistakes coming shows your weakness in the system. Same mistakes coming, it shows your the weakness in the person. Okay, the same person makes the same mistake multiple times, then you are out of the game. Okay, so this is again from the ICH-Q7 about the retention and retrieval. These records or copies shall be subject to photocopying or other means of reproduction as a part of such inspection. Okay, that 21 CFR 211 also states that records that can be immediately retrieved from another location by computer or other electronic means shall be considered as meeting the requirement of this paragraph. So, in case electronic records are available that can stay as the electronic record itself, you can demonstrate to the inspectors through the electronic format itself. No need to take a printout and reproduce a document to the inspection. Store the documents and record in a secure place until its retention period. So either it's in the form of electronic record or it's in a form of paper-based record, it should be secured and protected with a fireproof wall and fire protection, all other required intended controls. GDP implementations. So be honest, that is very important. Swear to record the actual data information. Don't falsify the data, please. That will be a problem for you itself. Don't, if suppose your manager or supervisor ask you to do a falsification, because this happens in the industry sometimes. Okay, your manager will ask you to do this manipulations, then you will be in a risk. Okay, take this to the next level. Don't take any decision within two persons. If your manager talks about this, you always have a right to go and talk to the superior person about the situation. So you can tell that this is the situation and my manager wants to handle the situation by doing a falsification of data, whether I am allowed to do that. Take a consent from them, otherwise you will be in a risk. Strengthen the review, report the deviation, train the operators or chemists and on common identified mistakes. So if one person make the common mistake, educate all the team. That will be helpful, that they won't do that particular mistake next time. So always keep in mind, your mistake is the learning for others and others' mistake is the learning for all of them. Okay, so learn by mistakes, but don't repeat the mistakes. All this is achievable through keep your mindset very positive attitude, keep positive thoughts, removal of mental blocks. Of course, we'll be having a lot of pressure and mental because we'll be influenced by multiple factors when you're going to office. Throw away and very consciously work during your work time. Open or willing to change. Okay, be open and transparent to the talk, to the discussion, to the managers, to bring all the discussion very clearly to them. Understand the need of business, destruction of ego. So don't be egoistic. This is very bad attitude to have own the ego. So definitely that will not give you a right approach or positive approach in the team spirit. As a summary, uh, documentation is a record or product history, of course. everything is dependent on the document. GMP documents are legal documents and requirement. The double check, the second reviewer assures that our work is correct. So you don't want to be, messed up with a lot of tension. So there is a person to always check and review your activity. Okay, if you grow up and become a manager, and you're responsible for the checking up for your juniors activity. Okay, so it's a chain of action. All work should be documented at the time of work is performed. It's contemporaneously documented. Correct the errors properly. So proper how now I think you might be knowing how to do the corrections. Okay, any corrections, the old data should be legible. Simple. Keep the old data legible. That is the good practice, not only in the industry, everywhere. Report the deviations if any and implement the proper kappa. So don't hide the mistakes. It is always the problem. Once you start hiding the mistakes, definitely today you done the mistake, tomorrow someone will do. So bring to the top level about the mistakes happened and get a solution and rectify it. That's fine. Train all the staffs on the GDP and explain the consequence. Of course, training is important when this kind of errors are being happen. I think we have done with the class as of now. And if you have 15 minutes left, I think 14 minutes left for you guys. If you have any queries, please be open for your chat, or you can raise your hands even for your direct call if you want. And of course, our technical query form is already been circulated. Come again. Now for the last session. I think for the last session we got 3 questions. Of course, we'll be responding back to you later. We'll update now itself. This is for today's class. Huh? Okay. I think we got some technical query form from one of the person. Um, Understanding the pharma industry, I think that is the topic we discussed. So many people were fooled with fake medicine during this pandemic. How to reduce the amount of fake medicine in the market? Very, very good question. I appreciate really about that part. We call this, I think it is Advaita. That's good. So we call that kind of fake medicines as a spurious drugs. I think in the morning session I told about that. Inspectors will go, drug inspectors will go for the site and start collecting the samples, right? So they know that whether it is a spurious drug or not by evaluating. Once they come to know that, they will take a offensive action. I think the reason days, we found that remdesivir was being spuriously created, okay, with some salt solution of water maybe, which is in the vials. So that is the reason now there is a new terminology called serialization. What is meant by serialization? I think we'll be having that topic in one of the session. Serialization is nothing but it's a tracking of vial data from the supplier or the manufacturer. So there will be a barcode, 2D code, everything. If you scan the data, you can understand that this medicine is being originated from this industry. Okay, in that way, you can avoid the fake medicines in the market. Of course, this is not the responsibility of regulatory authorities alone. It is the responsibility of also the individuals to verify when they purchase the material. Like how you check the expiry date, always you should be very cautious in verifying the QR code or 2D code, whatever may be. So that is very important. I think you already asked the other question. Augmented medicine using bioelectronics would be costly to manufacture and sell. How would we make it available in the common mass? You're right. Nowadays, there are different customized therapies are coming. Obviously, they are charged in crores because of the um, huge task of labor is involved in performing this activity. I hope CAR T cell therapy. It's a new cell therapy. Advanced technology is it's not in a booming stage, but it is in a very primitive stage in India. Okay, this CAR T cell therapy is being used for the manufacturing of the product. Okay, how they manufacture? They take the blood or sample from the patient. Okay, they run a individual batch after making a recombinant DNA technology, cloning and other stuff. They modify their gene and they run a special um, you know batch processing for that piece of customized medicine for that particular patient. Okay, which means a complete batch is being operated for one person. So the cost of the medicine goes in crores. Obviously, this is in a primitive stage. Right now, that will be the cost. But going to the years, maybe for next 10 years, the cost will definitely reduce. How the cancer drugs was there in last 10 years back, now it has been reduced. Similarly, this customized medicine will take some time to come to the normal level because of the lot of activities have been there. And the third query is that too much use of antipyretic is commonly used with the liver disorder. Why and how do these drugs affect the liver? This is very too technical. I can get you the data later because um, it depends upon your individual liver functions, okay, and the dosage, how much you're taking. So always, that's why I told, even if you're taking, what is this called? Healthy habits, like taking something healthy diet, if you're going more, that will be a poison for you. So in such way, this antipyretic diet drugs will be often you should take with a very limited numbers. For example, 650 mg is the allowable per day per dose. Okay, you can't take three times a day the 650 dolo 650 or paracetamol 650. The reason is, for one time you can use, but if you're taking three times a day, multiply by 3 and your body volume, and everything goes to your liver or maybe your kidney get impacted. That's the reason you should avoid as much as possible. Of course, if it is mandatory for your consumption, you have to go through the intravenous route. The next question from drug development, from one of the person: how are the drugs that passes the first pass metabolism excretion from blood? The first pass metabolism excretion from blood, and how is different from other ones to the enter first pass? I think I can give this answer. I have to understand a little more on the question, and I will come back to you. And if you have any questions for now, we can go ahead. Do you have any questions? Please type or raise your hand so that we can work on them. We can discuss on. So, is there any questions? I hope the team is awake and listening the session, right? So I'm really surprised there is no any questions. I'm doubtful on that. So please be, because this session may be from 3 to 6, but still it is an important session in your career path. So please spend your valuable time. I appreciate that everyone's time is valuable. So please be concentrated on this course. It is really helpful. So if you have any queries, please type now. We have left with 5 minutes at least. If not, go with the technical query form. We will be responding to you all the queries from the technical form, query form. Okay, if nothing more, we can sign off now. And thanks team. For tomorrow's, we will be sharing you the no questions. Thank you. So tomorrow there will be again a session. We'll be sharing you the the link only for the first session, and probably we'll be sharing the second link after 12:30 or something like that, because sharing both the link is, I think people get confused, so we don't want to mess up, because we want to make user friendly. So you should be not to be in a panic situation. So one link will come for the first entry. After completion of the day's activity, morning activity. The second link will follow for you. I think someone is writing some query. Just we'll give for 2 minutes. So I think yesterday we got an update and we shared the screenshot from the mail circulated from your team, from the coordinator. They kept 15th as the target for payment. So please, yesterday I told about 31st. That is for if you are not able to pay within VIT, then you can directly pay to Pharmageny until 31st, because we have to arrange an assessment plan for you with the third party certification body. So please be pay the fees before 15th. I think they already opened the VIT payment link. So probably you can able to access the payment. Once you've done the payment, obviously you can go back to the Google form and update us. So that will be helpful for us to understand that you paid the link, paid through the link. And if it is there is any problem, obviously you can directly pay to us. We will share our payment link soon after 15th if anyone fails to pay that. But the last cutoff time for payment is 31st with Pharmageny, and with VIT that will be 15th. 15th July is the cutoff for VIT payment link, and 31st with the Pharmageny link. And after that we freeze it because we have to go for the next plan for the assessment plan. And we found that people are shuffling from different courses, right? So that is acceptable till the end of the first session, the general session. Okay, we term it as 15. So beyond 15th, okay, beyond 15th, please do not go for any course changes, please. Okay, if you want, you can take additional course, but don't go for the course change next for the next time. So any course changes is acceptable till 15th of July. So 2 minutes left. So is there any queries? We didn't get any queries yet. If nothing is there, thanks for the day, team. Have a nice evening. Enjoy the day. Take care. Bye bye.